Good morning. Here's your Intel report for Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. In focus, revisiting the risk of a financial crisis. Back in September, Bank of America analysts warned of a potential liquidity crisis in the $22 trillion Treasury market. In our view, declining liquidity and resiliency of the Treasury market arguably poses one of the greatest threats to global financial stability today, potentially worse than the housing bubble of 2004 to 2007, Bank of America analysts wrote. I covered it in the September 9th early warning report and have a quick update for you this morning. I'll give a brief explanation here. Illiquidity means not having enough buyers or sellers on the other side of a trade, making buying and selling difficult. During times of illiquidity, large buy or sell orders swing market prices because there aren't enough available shares to fill the orders. Large buy orders going unfilled push prices up, while large sell orders going unfilled push prices down. This is called market volatility, and one of the causes is illiquidity. About a month ago, the Federal Reserve acknowledged the problem of high volatility and illiquidity in the Treasury market, which they said could lead to further adverse consequences for asset prices, credit availability, and the economy. Continued or more extreme market volatility could contribute to liquidity strains that play out in unexpected ways, i.e., a financial crisis. One of the dangers is that illiquidity leads to a financial crisis starting in treasuries. Treasuries are the backbone of the entire U.S. financial system, so a treasury market crisis could be catastrophic, but not quite unthinkable. The United Kingdom had a near miss when its bond market meltdown narrowly avoided a collapse in late September. And there was the 1994 bond market crisis in the U.S., which cost investors globally about $1.5 trillion. According to a blog post from a couple months ago, the Fed sounds confident they can step in and calm a treasury crisis. I don't doubt their ability in general, but even if they were to be successful, I am concerned about the financial scars an averted crisis would leave behind. And there's also the risk of financial contagion, a la 2008, that the Fed may not be able to stop. Investment banks and traders continue to cite a lack of market depth as a cause for concern. Volatility and the risk of a downturn next year are recurring topics at Goldman Sachs' 2022 Financial Services Conference, which started yesterday and ends today. Numerous bank executives and fund managers have warned that this era of volatility is not yet over, and several expect much worse conditions next year. I'll have wrap-up notes on these topics and more in tomorrow's economic early warning, which I'll send out to everyone. MS. Inside the Beltway. White House. The White House will host a roundtable discussion on antisemitism with Vice President Harris. Congress. The House is scheduled to consider H.R. 7776, which will be the legislative vehicle for the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. If passed, the new NDAA will rescind the military COVID-19 vaccine mandate and ban the use of Chinese-made semiconductors by federal contractors. The House Select Intelligence Committee is scheduled to conduct a markup on resolutions of inquiry into domestic intelligence community activities unrelated to foreign intelligence and intelligence community investigations into the origins of COVID-19. Domestic Intelligence Summary. Recession remains a domestic concern going into 2023. The Federal Reserve is scheduled to meet on December 13th to determine another rate increase. Energy shortages and high prices remain a concern in the short term, while proposed windfall taxes and penalties at federal and state levels would increase the risk of both. Energy companies continue shifting to a shareholder-focused model over expanding production. Proposed penalties on increased profit margins will not create incentives to expand production, and the threat of energy shortages will persist. U.S. and EU officials are cooperating on proposed tariffs on Chinese-produced and exported metals. Successful tariff implementation on Chinese aluminum and steel will push prices for metal products higher, which will be inflationary in construction and consumer goods. Goldman Sachs CEO prepares for recession. According to Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon, the firm is preparing to trim its operations as the economy slows. Solomon said that he expects stocks and residential real estate to be lower a year from now and that there is a reasonable possibility of a recession. Solomon predicted a 35% chance that the Federal Reserve can curb inflation without pushing the U.S. into a recession. California proposes limit on oil profits. New England Energy Company may ask residents to cut energy use. California Governor Gavin Newsom proposed a penalty on oil profits over a certain margin, though the proposal did not outline specific acceptable margin rates or penalties for profits over the limit. Northeast Regional Grid Operator ISO New England warned that it could ask residents and businesses to curtail demand to reduce stress on the grid this winter. High energy prices and shortages remain a concern heading into winter. Geopolitical instability, such as a new Russian campaign in Ukraine, will likely push energy prices higher. U.S. to cooperate with EU. On chips and metal tariffs, U.S. and EU officials agreed to work closely to strengthen semiconductor supply chains, including sharing information about government subsidies to promote domestic chip production. The U.S. and EU are considering new tariffs on Chinese aluminum and steel. The tariff framework would target China based on fighting climate change and use an existing investigation under the Trade Expansion Act. Crude oil exports increase. U.S. crude oil exports jumped to a record 4.15 million barrels per day in October, up from 3.51 million per day in September. The Biden administration has pursued a coercion campaign against oil and gas companies to limit or stop exports in order to reduce domestic prices. Increasing exports will bring more scrutiny and increase the likelihood that Biden takes executive action to curb exports. The move would likely push oil and gas prices higher, having the opposite intended effect in the Northeast, which is a large importer of refined oil and gas products. Warnock wins re-election. Incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock, Democrat Georgia, defeated challenger Republican Herschel Walker with 51.4% of the vote and 99% of districts reporting. Warnock's win will bring the Senate under Democratic control with 51 seats. Political pundits on both sides of the aisle continue criticizing former President Donald Trump in efforts to diminish his political influence in the GOP and lessen the chances of his nomination in the 2024 presidential campaign. Geostrategic Intel Summary. Germany disrupts coup plot. German police arrested 25 members of the Reichsbürger movement, who are accused of allegedly preparing to overthrow the German government by force. Among the arrestees were a Russian citizen, a former Army Special Forces officer, a former Alternative for Deutschland Bundestag member, and Heinrich 13 of the House of Rus. Reportedly, the arrestees intended to install a monarchy. The Reichsbürger movement is estimated to have 21,000 active members. Russia's Wagner Group linked to conflict diamond market. Mercenary forces belonging to Russia's Wagner Group have been linked to the sale of conflict diamonds in the Central African Republic. Reports by London's Dossier Centre and France's All Eyes on Wagner research firms accused Wagner Group fighters of utilizing violence to seize or coerce the sale of African diamonds to the Diamville Company, a Wagner-linked shell company. The allegations follow similar reports that Wagner Group has also sought to exploit gold mining operations in the country. Citing internal investigations which indicated all activities were conducted in line with international norms, Wagner founder and Putin supporter Yevgeny Prigozhin denied the reports as unsubstantiated Western propaganda. Diamonds trafficked from active conflict zones, known as conflict diamonds or blood diamonds, have repeatedly been used as a currency for terror groups and black market weapons sales. Wagner's increasing activities in the CR provide a steady revenue stream and access to a preferred currency used by groups that could be hired to perform as proxy forces to advance Russian interests. Russia-NATO Situation Report. UK unions call for coordinated strikes. Officials from the United Kingdom's RMT Rail Labour Union have called for other unions to coordinate planned strikes amid growing labour disputes. RMT accused employers and the government of launching a general attack on working people that have forced workers to rely on food banks and other subsidies amid rising inflation. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch said labor unions had a duty to coordinate their actions to protect their members. Critics of the strikes have denounced labor unions for inconveniencing people and holding the country to ransom ahead of the holidays. The call to coordinate strikes allows unions to maximize the disruptive impact of strikes while avoiding governmental claims of an illegal general labor strike as more unions vote to adopt strike measures daily. Unconfirmed reports indicate UK government ministries are actively holding meetings to coordinate a governmental response to the growing labour crisis. Poland receives first shipment of Korean heavy weapons. Polish defense officials took possession of the first shipment of South Korean heavy weapons produced for the Polish army. Citing Russian aggression in Ukraine, Polish President Andrzej Duda praised the rapid delivery of the weapons, saying it was of critical importance that the army receive modern equipment needed to stop the enemy. The shipment included 10 K2 Black Panther tanks and 24 K9 Thunder howitzers, the first of hundreds purchased by the Polish armed forces in a deal worth $5.8 billion. Regular deliveries of new equipment are expected to continue through 2025. China and Indo-Pacific Situation Report. India to upgrade Su-30 for war with China. Citing Russian Su-30 losses in Ukraine, India is upgrading its Su-30 flankers with indigenous sensors and modern Russian engines. Indian media claims this is in preparation for a war with China sometime in the next decade while the Su-30 is still operational. India's involvement in a US-China war would force the Chinese into a two-front conflict, which China will be unlikely to sustain. Unrest rocks Mongolia amid anti-corruption protests. Thousands took to the streets of the Mongolian capital Ulaanbaatar and attempted to storm the government palace in violent protests over government corruption. Protesters called for the disbanding of the parliament following allegations of embezzlement and illegal sales of coal smuggled into China by 30 government officials linked to the country's owned mining company, Erdenstaven Tallgoy. Chinese foreign ministry officials denied having knowledge of any illegal sales of Mongolian coal. PLA to emphasize NCO importance. In light of the Ukraine war, China is emphasizing leadership and technical skills in its non-commissioned officer, NCO, corps. Non-commissioned officers will receive more advancement opportunities, a voice for planning large operations, classes on warfighting and tactics, and authorities delegated to them typically reserved for the officer corps. Hypercentralization was always a crucial weakness of the People's Liberation Army. The new structure is more similar to that of the US NCO Corps, where tactical level units can adapt to their environment without awaiting operational or strategic level approval, making them more effective in combat. India to shoot another missile in the Bay of Bengal. India issued a notice to airmen for the 15th and 16th of December over the Bay of Bengal. They are expected to test an Agni V missile in response to a Chinese surveillance ship patrolling the Indian Ocean. This will be the third test in less than a month. India is fresh off a coastal and maritime defense exercise that encompassed the country's entire coastline. End report.